Hey, and welcome to Matt and Jess TV. I am Matt Roast here with Jessica Bun Bun. We are going to try to explain and review how memory is a monster on Interview with the Vampire Season 2, Episode 5. That is a tagline they've used a lot, AMC, to promote this season, and I feel like AMC executive man must have been like, this is our signature episode. This is the one that we have to really get people on board. And, I honestly think it's probably going to be a pretty polarizing episode. I think there's going to be people who love it, and there's going to be people that are just sort of like, I want more of the past. I love this episode. This may be my favorite episode of the whole show. I'll say that.
Oh,
I'll say that
whoa.
right now. Like, I love it.
No, it was a really good episode. I think for me, it's always more difficult when there's more Daniel in the episodes because he's my least favorite character on the show. I think his bottomless casual cruelty and just handing it out to the vampires and everyone in his life, learning that that bag story was true. I just don't like his character. So the more Daniel I get, the more I'm kind of like, eh. But that being said, this episode was excellent, and I think it was extremely important for me specifically to
Mhm.
know what the connection is between Daniel and Louis and why it's so important for Louis to have Daniel as an outlet.
I just think it was a really good resource into who these characters are. I like Daniel way more as a character than you do. Like, I'm not saying I want to be interviewed by Daniel. I do not. I do not want to be in the same room as this guy, but he is like such a damaged person who has done some very bad things, and yet he has
Yes.
found sort of this one way to continuously move forward, and that is his work. I mean, is that in part because of some things that have been done to him, perhaps by vampires? Yeah, sure. But at the same time, I do find him fascinating, and I think a lot of it to me really just comes down to the fact that I like being in sort of the present. I like this idea of the great unknown where I don't know what's going to happen with
Mhm.
these characters. And there is something refreshing about it. Did I miss Claudia? Sure, but
Yes.
I still think we're going to get a lot more of her in the upcoming episode, so I'm okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, we're going to get so much more into this episode, what we learned, like the big question marks that remain. But be sure to hit that like button. That helps us a lot in the algorithm. And
Mhm.
hit that subscribe button as well so you don't miss any more coverage throughout the remaining 3 episodes of Interview with the Vampire this season.
And if you're looking for more Interview with the Vampire coverage, follow us over on our Patreon. It's a great way to help support us here at the channel so
Mhm.
that we can continue to bring you more videos like this. And there's more discussion going on over there about the show, plus everything else that we cover here at the channel. So
Mhm.
thank you very much to our Patreons for your support. Okay, let's touch on something that you just brought up,
Mhm.
which is Daniel and his career. And how Louis has put this suggestion in his head way back in the 70s that his career is going to be like a touchstone for him,
Mhm.
something that he will always push forward with everything that happened to him in that apartment. That will always be his rock. And it was such a, I know it's not great to manipulate people's
I
minds
know.
or whatever, but it was just such a nice touchstone that after everything that Louis got out of Daniel, and we'll get more into that of why Daniel is as important as he is to Louis, that he was able to give something to him because Daniel was basically like, yeah, I am kind of a jerk. I've done a lot of really bad things. I've
Yeah.
messed up a lot of my relationships. I've messed up a lot of my life. But the one thing that I haven't messed up is my career. And, something that a memory that I thought was something else was actually you, Louis, putting into me that this career is extremely important to me and that no matter what, I can keep pushing through and I can get there. And I wouldn't have even had my career if it wasn't for those words that have rung in my head for my entire life. He would have had nothing.
What I really like about this episode, I think in part, is it answers a lot of the questions I have as a non-book reader of, okay, what are these vampires in this world capable of doing? Because we all know, like, the smart, sparkly vampires in Twilight, or, vampires on the Vampire Diaries, or
Yeah.
Instant True Blood, or whatever. All of them have, like, various things they can do, but what can these Anne Rice vampires do? And I think in this episode, we really get the sense further of, okay, here is how Louis was able to implant something in Daniel's head that was so valuable to him
Mhm.
for such a really long time. And so, yeah, it's provided something, an outlet, a benefit for Daniel, but it's also provided something for Louis that, he knows that no matter what happens to him for the rest of Daniel's life, he's going to have this journalist who still cares about this job, who still cares about this story. So it's really this mutually beneficial thing. And for a lot of this show, I sort of joke that, okay, being a vampire is pretty terrible. You live forever, you see all these people you love die, you're miserable, but it's like, oh, here's a vampire who's actually using his powers to maybe do a little bit of good for somebody who is not altogether good in every other aspect of their life.
Well, that was interesting too, because in the past we saw a moment where Daniel was like, turn me, make me a vampire. I'll have that. So here's a question for you guys in the audience. Also, a question for you.
Yeah.
If this was offered to you, would you take this offer? Vampire, yes. Vampire, no.
Hell no. Like, I don't want to be a vampire. Like that. Okay. This is the thing. Sure. Did I dress up as a vampire for this past Halloween? Absolutely. But it's like,
Yes, you did.
being a vampire is sort of like going to an isolated tropical island where it seems like it's a great idea. You can spend a little bit of time there, but after a certain amount of time, you're like, you know what? I think I'm good. I think I need to get back to everything else, because it's just living forever is a curse to me more than it is a blessing. A lot of the powers, like I like to go out in the sunlight sometimes, and we certainly saw in this episode what happened to Louis when he went out in the daytime. It just feels like it's such a burden to have to take on, and I understand why the impulse may be there from somebody like Daniel, or for a lot of other people who are just thinking, imagine all the accomplishments I can have if I have forever to work on them. But there's just so many downsides.
Yeah, I agree. Vampire, no. I'm not interested in vampirism for the rest of my life.
No, I even hate it when I'm just a vampire in Skyrim. I'm just like, can I get out of this? Like, this is too much for me.
Okay, let's talk
Yeah.
about Louis and why Armand's big thing was, why are you so fascinating to Louis? Louis
Mhm.
had said, he's had his whole life. Armand is boring. Nobody's, giving anything to him in the way that these past 10 hours
Yeah.
with Daniel have. So what is it? And Armand really can't figure it out. But for me, I feel that the thing that Daniel is giving to Louis is an audience. He's allowing Louis to actually be himself, talk about himself, dive deeper into who he is. A lot of the theme of this show for Louis is, who is Louis?
Mhm.
Who is Louis in a relationship? Who is Louis without a relationship? I mean, even at the beginning of the season when they were in Paris and he was sitting across from Claudia and she was like, this is your chance, man. Like, you can find yourself away from me. Like, who is Louis? And Louis is going around taking photos, trying to figure out who he is, learning about himself the best he can. But he hasn't actually had somebody that he's connected to that hasn't been trying to control him in some sort of way where he's not in touch with himself and what he feels and what he thinks and what he's doing for himself. And then in comes Daniel, who's a journalist whose job is to be like, record, tell me about you. Nothing about me. I'm not here for me. I'm only here for you. Where Louis like, wow, okay, well, what do I do with this now? No one's ever really sat down to be like, let's talk about Louis. Let's talk about who he is, what he likes, what he feels, everything about him. He's had these two men, Lestat and Armand, who really love him and he loves back. But at the same time, he also has Claudia, who he really loved, who cared about him, but it wasn't exactly the same. And for him to just have a platform that's all about Louis is very valuable to him. And that's why, for me, I think Daniel is as valuable as he is and gave him this very special thing that no one has given him.
There is this part of me that does occasionally wonder, okay, Louis, would you be just as benefiting from giving therapy or like some other sort of outlet out there?
Possibly.
Possibly. But, if this is your therapy, hats off to you. And it's mutually beneficial, obviously, because Daniel feels like he's getting something out of this that's
Right.
extremely valuable and something that he can build towards the future. And I think a part of what makes Armand frustrated about these interactions in general is just this idea that these two have this connection that's very individualized. It's
Mhm.
something that I don't think Armand can ever fully understand or wrap his head around. Like, I think there's an element of jealousy here. It's not a romantic jealousy, but it is sort of this you're allowing yourself to have this intimacy with this other person that, I never get to have with you. So I don't know what's going on here. And that's why there's even a part of me that was surprised that Armand decided, okay, I got to go feed at this point, and just even leaving Daniel and Louis alone for that long. I didn't necessarily think he would do that.
No, I didn't think he would do that either. I think it felt like at this point, he really wanted to be in so much control of the interview so that these two didn't realize that Armand had edited out a part of both of their memories
Yeah.
at the same time and fed them both the same lie or the same story that they would just repeat over time, that they wouldn't be able to figure it out. And I think he got a little bit comfortable with that he thought at this point that he had done a good enough job. He's been able to keep it secret for long enough that they were not going to be able to figure out that Armand played a heavy role in making sure that they don't remember everything about this moment.
Yeah, and that's the big question I have coming out of this episode is, what do they not remember now? Because if they both had their memories edited at the same exact point,
Mhm.
we're in this spot where it's like, okay, there's clearly something that must have happened at this particular point, because yeah, they can sort of work together to build most of the timeline, but they can't really do anything with this. So is it just something that Armand did that makes him feel like, okay, neither one of them can know about this because it's going to radically change, their opinions of me? Or is it just a situation where he felt it was necessary to reset the situation? I just think there's still something missing here, and I don't know when we're going to learn about it.
I found that this was a really interesting story about Armand as well for me to really learn about him. I mean, he's always been kind of this character that just doesn't really feel like he fits in. Like even
Yeah.
when he was, running the coven, he didn't really fit in with anybody. He didn't have a connection with everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody at the theater was all together and then Armand is sort of on the side. And even when he tried to have his relationship with Lestat used him and dumped him. Like he just can't find that person. So now that he has Louis, he's willing to do anything to
Mhm.
keep him, whether that's editing his memories or controlling what he thinks. Like this whole thing in the past with Daniel, where he's sitting him down, is like, I need to know, why are
Mhm.
you so fascinating? Is it because you did this terrible thing with the bag, which we're not going to get into because it
Yeah.
was horrifying to me to hear that Daniel did that, or any of these other things, right? He's just like, I need to know the magic in the sauce so that I can give that to Louis, so that Louis will love me and he will want to be my partner and he will find me fascinating, and maybe he won't want to spend nights out with these other people where then I have to clean up the mess the next day and try to find him and bring him home, and like, that I'll be enough for him. It
There
was really sad.
It is really sad. There is so much emotional frustration that is here with Louis and Armand, where it's like they both understand each other, but they also only understand a piece of each other. There's always like this element that's missing. And it does bring me to this fear that Armand's insecurity and, controlling nature and some of the things that he's done are sort of leading up to this situation where at the end of the season, Louis and Armand are either going to go their separate ways or something is going to happen to Armand. I don't know if I see the two of them together after this season. I think there's going to be something pretty drastic that happens, and maybe that ends up creating a lot more action and tension in the present. Maybe Lestat shows up and he's just a wrecking ball to things, but I just think we're building towards some big singular event.
Lestat is a wrecking ball to everything, anyways. I
Yeah.
mean, during this time when Louis was giving his interview, he was still talking about Lestat, talking about Lestat. And even when he's like, Armand, I was trashing him, don't worry. He's like, but you're still just talking about him. He's always present.
Yeah.
You're always talking about him. Like, we can't have a solid relationship if this is looming on us, because you've kept him in the present in our
Yeah.
relationship the whole time. Like, and I understand Armand's frustration. I'm not excusing what he's done by fogging their brains
Yeah.
and editing whatever and controlling the situation, but I understand his frustration with it. The real is Armand should have left. But because it is such a small group of vampires out there, whatever's happened with the coven, he's burned that bridge.
Yeah.
So, who else is out there? We watched Louis and Claudia go for years traveling around looking for other vampires, and they found that one person. Like, he knows that it is a very small pool. So if he doesn't make it work with Louis, he's got to make a bigger pool or be alone.
This is why I don't want to be a vampire. There's just so much innate loneliness that comes with this, and just constantly looking for somebody who you can spend this eternity with. And yeah, there's huge problems with the two of them. And I don't know if these are problems that are ever going to be fully reconciled. And I think that's just the big issue in all this, coupled, of course, with the fact that, we still don't know where exactly Lestat is or what he's
Right.
doing. Maybe he turns up this season, maybe he doesn't, but there's still that looming threat that's sort of bubbling out there. But that whole back and forth about Lestat in this episode, like, that is one of like 3 or 4 just like A+ monologues that are delivered in here. And I think that's why, to me, this episode could be polarizing, is that there might be people that wanted more action, but that monologue, the monologue about rest and just how Armand is sort of able to calm down that situation, the tragedy of Louis going out into the sunlight thinking he's about to end everything. Like, there's just these singular, just like searing, powerful moments you see in here.
Yeah, I in general really like episodes that are mostly in one place,
Mhm.
like, Breaking Bad and The Fly and stuff like that. So they did a lot with a small amount of space.
Yeah, they did, and they made it all stand out, and they made it all sort of emotionally justified. Where Louis, at the time he goes out there, he is just feeling full of rage and sadness and pain, that he's just been haunted in so many years by so many different ways, and nothing is ever going to work out right. And
Yep.
it was such a horrifying image, but it was played so well and so justified.
And it was interesting too, because it seemed like for a long time, Louis believed that Armand is the person who saved Daniel,
Mhm.
and that was the memory that was left. And all the rest of it was edited out, where we had this scene nearer to the end where Armand was, you know, getting Daniel to that point to rest so that he could kill him. Because he said at the beginning, he either likes people that he's going to hunt or people who are on their way out and want to rest.
Mhm.
And that he was sort of convincing Daniel, you're not this great guy. Things are not great for you. You're coming to the end, right? It's time to rest, right? And that is actually Louis that comes out and saves Daniel and is like, no, please, like, leave him.
And then at the end of all of this in this episode, Armand basically gets up on his high horse and it's just like, I know that Daniel is important to you, Louis.
Yeah.
And it's just like, okay, Armand, how much are you having to. Does everybody else in this episode even believe anything with Armand anymore? I think that's just another big takeaway I have coming out of this, is that slowly and surely it feels like he's being unraveled, and more stuff is coming out that makes people question him. But is there ever going to be anything that's so definitive where they're just like, okay, we're done with this guy. Goodbye. You don't get to be in the interview anymore.
Yeah, I'm really curious now going into the next episode, having Armand come in and feed this same story that he's fogged their minds with, and having both of them actually know a lot more about what happened, where Louis and Daniel are back on the same side of things, where they're really realizing things. I can't wait to hear what that next conversation is going to be. Are they going to share that with
Yeah.
Armand, or are they not going to? I mean, Daniel is fearless in a lot of this. So I feel like he will call it out. But I mean, they didn't have enough time to kind of come up with a plan to be like, how are we going to deal with this?
Well, that there could be so much chaos moving forward, because I could easily see them being like, so anyway, France, what
Yeah.
happened? And they're gonna try to continue down that road, and we'll start. But then this like huge skeleton is just still not unearthed fully, and it's gonna just like dig and dig and dig at them until eventually it all comes out, because it has to. And then it's just like, if you guys wait on this so long, is it just gonna like manifest within you that it then just explodes and then you don't even give Armand a chance to explain it?
Yeah, and Daniel still hasn't even told them that they're being listened to. So, I mean, and he seemingly has forgotten some of that as well
Yeah.
because he's talking freely in front of his laptop. I know that they
Yeah.
eventually moved to the other room, but I mean, a lot of it was being freely talked about in front of this laptop that he knows is bugged.
Okay, well, we'll spend a minute here on this because it is an important storyline that, yeah, Daniel's being watched and all of that. But unless you're either a reader or somebody who understands the Anne Rice universe, or you watch Mayfair Witches or whatever, like they've not really done enough to touch on like the Talamasca and I hope like that whole side of things on Interview with the Vampire, the show. It just feels like it's, oh, you don't need to know all of this. And I'm just sitting here being like, I want to know a little bit more about what's actually going on, please.
Yeah, me too.
It's just like they're relying too much on people either assuming other things or that you're going to be focused enough on this stuff. And don't get me wrong, I'm pretty focused on this stuff. I mean, for a good chunk of this video, I totally even forgot that he was being listened to until you brought it up again.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I've read the material and watched the movie a million years ago, but like them being listened to is the least interesting thing that's happening on the show. If it wasn't there, I would be thrilled. Like for right now, I just don't care about it at all. It's just, it feels like a distraction to these really deep human stories that are happening to these vampires.
Yeah, I don't necessarily need to see another episode like this coming up in the near future, but for this one episode, I love that we got some answers. I love that I personally understand more what these vampires are capable of, and I
Mhm.
just love that there is this even greater reason for tension around Armand that feels like it's going to make all these stories like so much more chaotic.
I also just love, especially this season, how relatable a lot of these situations are and these stories are. We're talking about vampires, but we're really talking about relationships
Yeah.
and complicated relationships. Like even with Armand and what he's doing, where he's trying to control a situation of somebody that he really, really loves and he doesn't want to lose, and his desperation because there's no one else out there, but he also really loves Louis because he met him at a time when
Yeah.
was other vampires out there. But I think a lot of people out there just relate to these stories because down at the core, Louis' relationship with Lestat, with Armand, with Claudia, with Daniel are all very human relatable.
Yeah, and that's what they've done a really good job of delivering is that yes, vampires can live forever, but also vampires, they deal with a lot of the same sort of emotional stuff that
Right.
we do. It's
Yeah.
just amplified to another degree because they are spending decades around each other.
Yes.
It is very messy, very difficult. I'm so excited for where these next few episodes are going to go leading through the rest of the season.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have that many episodes left. I mean, this season has really just blown by.
Well, we want you guys to be around us for the rest of the season, so be sure to hit that subscribe button,
Mhm.
smash that like button as well. That helps us in the algorithm.
Mhm.
Also, be sure to join our Patreon for more Interview with the Vampire coverage. We've got a link in the description below.
Mhm.
Thank you so much to our patrons as
Thank
well
you.
for your support, and we will see you here next time.